13. The Aftermath of Betrayal. On 15 January 2005, as dawn's early light crept over Buffalo's Bay, I sat, shattered, on a garden bench. I cursed the heavens, unleashing profanities into the air. Alone on the bench, face to face with divinity, I seethed with rage, feeling an inner force that could part the ocean, just as Moses parted the Red Sea. Swearing and sobbing uncontrollably, my mind reeled in despair. I wrestled with the cruel reality of Gurik's fate. Sexually molested from age 3 to 11, under my own roof, while I was painfully oblivious, lost in spirituality and journaling. What a monstrous failure! What an unforgivable, soul-crushing betrayal! I vowed to stop writing, convinced it was all make-believe, a mirage born from my childhood fantasies. Writing had become my escape mechanism, a coping strategy I employed when reality became too overwhelming. I tumbled down the rabbit hole, escaping to an Alice in Wonderland world where impossible things seemed plausible. In that moment, I saw the horrifying truth. My words had betrayed me, silencing the screams of my own child. I also vowed to bring the perpetrator to justice. I promptly opened a case, and within 24 hours, a police official met with Gurik and me at our rented home. Henny's world had imploded. Sequestration, business collapse, and losing our family home had left him depressed and angry. Sitting beside Gurik, with the official and his file across from us, Gurik revealed the shocking truth. Secret codes, subtle nods, and bathroom encounters. Sunday afternoons, while we napped. My God, on Sundays! The officer's expression remained stoic, but mine was shattered. For Gurik's sake, I hid my shock and trauma behind a calm mask. As he revealed the abuse, his eyes pleaded for permission to expose the secrets. I nodded softly, my heart racing. I couldn't protect you then, but I'll protect you now, I vowed silently. The perpetrator will face justice. The officer recommended counselling, promising a social worker's call. Still I wait. Weeks later, I stumbled upon a book on grief at the library. Reading about its stages brought a sense of relief, and I realized that my emotions were normal. For weeks, I'd been oscillating between reality and denial, torn between uncontrollable sobs, simmering anger, and suffocating sadness that threatened to shatter my heart. Divinity intervened again, without my acknowledgement, as I couldn't trust my heart. On the day of the court date, we were instead in Christie's rooms. A heart-wrenching letter to me a couple of days earlier from the other mother, also broken, pleaded with me not to proceed with the court case. I agreed on one condition: They would fly from Pretoria and meet at Christie's rooms, where I needed to ask her son, "How could you? Look me in the eyes and tell me why. How could you betray my trust like that when I thought we were close? You shared your deepest fears with me. Why keep this secret hidden?" In Christie's rooms, our gut-wrenching 4-hour session concluded with hugs, tears, and a deep sense of relief. I felt comforted, knowing I hadn't ignored or swept the betrayal under the rug. My heart ached for Gurik to see that I wasn't a failed mother, that I was desperately trying to make amends and heal our wounds. Esther Marie, just 7 years old, was a vibrant and carefree child, blessed with a robust personality and an unwavering sense of self. Henny adored her, radiating pride over her strong, independent spirit and unbridled willingness to express herself. Amidst the perpetual turmoil of our daily life, I breathed a sigh of relief, grateful that Esther Marie seemed remarkably unscathed. As we drove home, a nagging voice whispered, "Don't settle for easy. This isn't over. The damage during Gurik's formative years is irreparable. You'll suffer the consequences."